Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Huberman, Band of Brothers, played Private Lester Hashey.
Hi. Thanks, Emil, for having me on.
It's a timeless show that keeps garnering a new audience every year, so it's still very, very much on the forefront of everybody's minds.
Yeah, it's unbelievably true. The show, like you say, just keeps getting passed on between friends, families, generations, and the pool widens and widens and widens, and the people that watched it first want to watch it again, and the people that haven't seen it yet want to watch it with those people and share it with those people. So it just keeps growing and growing. It's kind of amazing.
As one of the air quote replacement guys, you didn't get to spend any time in the camp. Boot camp is what I mean. Did not going to the boot camp, was that a sticking point throughout the shoot?
Really, it was, because I think I heard about boot camp, and I actually knew one of the other actors who was going to play a replacement as well. So I knew about boot camp, and I obviously really, really wanted to go, and was told that I couldn't. So that was tricky. So then when I got to set, the actors, there were so many rules and things being put upon the actors on set to try and make it as strict and disciplined as possible, which are completely understandable. And even by the time I got there into episode 3, some of those had been loosened a tiny little bit. But the guys who'd gone to boot camp together had experienced something together that I didn't, and that was to replicate what had actually happened. So there was definitely that sense that you weren't there, you don't know, and you haven't been trained as well as we have, literally, and the bonding those lads did. That kind of kept going, and the beginning, my first experience, I definitely did spend more time with my fellow replacements, which would have happened. So, it was mad in the way they set it up, but they were replicating the realities of what these lads faced when they went and joined, and it did work, and a lot of the actors were told not to talk to me, literally, the only one who did was Dexter, he played Sergeant Martin, and I don't know if that was a rank thing, but he was like, how you doing? That's where you put your clothes, that's where you're going to have your food, that's where we're going to be traveling to, blah, 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 but no one else spoke, literally. So, which I didn't really understand. I'd been very new on the acting scene, so I don't know if that was, it was intimidating to begin with. But that carried through, and I understand that, and I even feel it now. It's like a school reunion when you hang out with the lads now. Because I didn't go to boot camp then, it still makes a difference, 100%. I think, in a way. And I remember because the actors have been told to behave that way or treat us that way, and I remember Frank John Hughes, like like all of us, we were all ringing the lads back in America and asking them questions anytime we could, or anytime different issues or places in the story came along. So Frank rang back and said, listen, the replacements are here. What happens? How did you feel about the replacements? We're being told to ignore them. And Garnier said, look, they were one of us. They were a soldier. They were part of the same team as us. So we treated them the same. So Frank was like, oh, okay, we're being told not to. So Frank then made an effort after that week to try and be friendly with everyone. But that didn't last very long for me, because Garnier then visited the set about maybe 2 weeks later. And it was like Elvis coming to set. It was unbelievable. We were in the middle of episode 4, and himself and Babe came to set. And what was amazing at first was to see how amazed they were by how it just looked exactly the same as they remembered. Like the setup, the road, the tank drive they go into the town, where the tall guy at the front was shot. That was the scene we were doing. And they were like, this is exactly it. Like that hedge was there, that tree was there, that house was there. And so we all stood around and listened to them tell stories and listened to their memories and just watching their reaction to seeing the place replicated as it was. So I went up to him and I was like, do you remember Hashey? Do you remember Lester Hashey at all? And he wasn't very complimentary about Hashey. And Frank was right there beside him. And that was the last day Frank spoke to me until the last day, which was maybe 7-8 months later.
Oh, my God.
And just on the last day, he kind of turned and gave me a bit of a, you know why I didn't speak to you, don't you? He was like, yeah, cool, yeah, totally. So that was that. So I had a week of time with Frank, which was lovely.
Wow.
That was a very tricky thing, and it was so delicate. And I'm speaking to Lester himself on the phone, and I spoke a lot to Garcia as well, and because you want to kind of get a secondhand, because like all of us, like my memories of the shoot are not totally honest, I'm sure. So these boys' memories of what actually happened, it was nice to speak to other people around them to go, listen, Lester said this. Do you remember? He's like, yeah, that did happen. That kind of thing. So, it was tricky because he was definitely portrayed as, maybe one of the more naive, or not naive, or just nervous, perhaps, soldiers on the show. So that was delicate, and I felt that the script definitely did that a lot to him. And you're speaking to the guy in real life, and you're speaking to his family, and you're like, oh my God, and I mean, we dropped into Holland. He's definitely portrayed as being, a little bit overawed by the whole experience. So that was tricky. But then, yeah, I mean, Frank wasn't a big, or Garnier wasn't a big fan of his. So, and again, yeah, in terms of his soldiering, I suppose, that's pretty much what he said. But I mean, Garnier was a cheeky man. So
would you say that Garnier was just deflecting the fear that Hashey was exuding, being a nervous soldier? It's like you scare me because you're afraid.
Yeah, maybe. I think he was a bit of a messer. I think he was, a little bit younger than a lot of the lads, and I'm not saying in any way that he wasn't as good a soldier, but I just think he had a giddiness or an energy that some of them had lost by the time he arrived. I think the replacements were just at a different energy level, and they were, this was all fresh to them per se.
They hadn't witnessed the horrors of war yet.
Exactly. So when that first arrived, their enthusiasm, like you say, may have come out the wrong way, or giddiness or nervousness may have been perceived the wrong way. And I think that may definitely been a part of it. But I think, but on top of that, I think Les was just a very different rhythm to Garnier. So that may have been the issue. But yeah, I mean, I think, definitely. But that was the tricky part, like I say, because I was being asked to portray this man, and I was in touch with this man and forming a friendship with this guy, and I didn't want him to be portrayed in a way that wasn't fair or true, or so that was a little bit tricky. But like I say, Garnier was didn't hesitate to say how he felt about him anyway.
Well, after talking with Bill and Babe themselves, I don't doubt that one bit. The first thing I asked him before we even got on the air, it was getting ready to snow in Philly. And I was like, well, hey, are you guys ready for this big snowfall that's going to happen? He's like, hell, snow. Pff, at least it ain't Bastogne.
Yeah, well.
And I was like, oh, my God, that's the greatest thing ever. One of the girls in the chat room has a T-shirt line that's dedicated to the Band of Brothers show. And she's going to use that quote. At least it ain't Bastogne.
Now, Mark, did you get the chance to meet Lester Hashey?
Yeah, well, when I actually was going to go to see him before we started filming, and his wife was sick at the time. So it was really tricky for him. He was like, I'd love you to come, but it's not quite right now. And I was just running out of time because it was getting closer and closer to shooting. So that didn't happen, but I did. I mean, I spent, which was funny in a way because, for a lot of the guys, we got to know the veterans so well when we'd finished filming. But which may have been good or bad, because I think, bringing in maybe too much emotion about them or trying, as them as friends might have been just different. Like getting to know them over the phone or reading about them or talking to them about the actual events was probably the best way. But no, I spent the week in Paris. The premiere was incredible, and I spent a lot of time with Lester. He's a really good guy. And again, he just wanted to have fun. He was in Paris, and he was going to make sure he was in Paris. So every day there was tours organized, and he'd be like, "Look, you can do the tour. Absolutely. I'm just going to go and sit in the main street and smoke a cigar and look at the women. So you do what you want." So we did that one day. We sat and smoked cigars and looked at the ladies for an afternoon, which was nice, instead of going to a museum, which I thought was a good idea.
So museums out, cigars in. I like that.
Yeah, it was a nice time of year. It was summery, why go indoors? But yeah.
Let's go indoors and look at a bunch of dusty crap, and we can sit outside in the sun and smoke.
Pictures of women are actual women, and we went for the other one. Yeah, it was good.
Exactly. That was a good choice. Now, tell us a little bit about your audition process. We found out that a lot of the guys had similar but very strange and different in a lot of aspects when it comes to the audition process. Was yours cattle called? Did they call you? How did it work? How did you get there?
Well, no, they definitely didn't call me. I mean, I suppose so many of the lads particularly kind of being cast through London. I mean, I didn't even know that a lot of the parts were gone. A lot of the American boys were already on board. When I auditioned, I suppose the first time would have been the end of '99. I was doing my first ever job, and actually 3 of the lads on that job, we all auditioned the same week, and all the lads got into it. It was the last week of filming. We were filming in Dublin, and everyone was being very secretive. It was like, oh yeah, I'm going to London on Wednesday. Oh yeah, me too. And then no one told anyone until they all got callbacks. But yeah, so it was kind of, the first one, it was kind of an amazing experience because it went, like I can still see that the audition piece was like 1 page. A scene with Lieutenant Jones, Sergeant Malarkey and Lieutenant Jones was the audition piece that I think every single actor that went for it did. And then, even I was cheeky at the time because they were only seeing lads living in London. So my agent said, oh yeah, he lives there. Didn't, but his dad's from London. So his dad kind of lives in London. So yeah, I kind of lied, I suppose, by saying I lived there. So I flew over, and then I think I did 8 auditions in total, going over and over and back. And
the same page, or they give you a new page every time?
It was, well, I'll tell you, it was the same page, then it was the same page, and then I flew into when some of the heavies started arriving from America, and more people in the room, they gave us different characters to read. And then it went back to that same page again. So it was kind of like, what does that mean? So it was, I was like, I know that we did this in December, but yeah, kept going. And it was mad even because I remember faces. I remember George Khalil being in the room. I remember seeing, I remember the lads being around. I remember Nolan being there, and we were all sitting around because some of the days, one day particularly when early on, they were saying, listen guys, we're really, really sorry. It's taking a long time. Everyone's getting a long time in the room. So even if you're booked for 1, you might not be in now till 3. And some people left. I mean, some guys walked out, and you just kind of think, oh my God.
Wow.
But, so we all just sat around and got more and more nervous and drank more coffee the auditioning was mental because for me, like I flew every time. So I was flying in from Dublin to go in for the thing. And I wasn't supposed to be. And I actually remember one of the auditions with one of the producers that we all know. He said, listen, okay, will you come back tomorrow? And a lesson that you learn as an actor when you're older, you're like, absolutely, I'll come back tomorrow. So I told, let's call his initials TH. I told TH that I couldn't come back tomorrow because my flight was at 6:30 tonight and I'm gone. So he was like, oh. Everyone turned to look to me. It was like, oh, the stupid Irish guy is saying no. I was like, so, and then he said, all right, cool. Well, then maybe, I'll tell you what, you look at this for half an hour and come back in again. So that's what I did. And on one of the days. And
that was all the direction that he gave you, was look at this for a half an hour?
Yeah, he said, imagine this is a radio play because you don't have time to we just want to hear you say the words. So, so I went out into the corridor, and I remember it was a nice posh hotel in London, and there was a conference on, and I sat beside this coffee stand, and then 2 minutes later, 100 people came out and they cross-ons in my face, and I was literally saying my lines out loud, didn't care, let's learn this quick and go back in. But, so I mean, and like I say, then you flew back, and then I remember as well, one of the sessions in London, an actor came in, there was about 6 of us sitting around again, we were there kind of all day. And, people were talking about rumors and no one knew what was going on. And we've all been brought back 3 and 4 and 5 times. And one guy was like, okay, guys, everyone here is in the show. As far as I know, everyone here is just deciding who we play. And I was like, what? No. Yeah. And it was just like rumor on rumor on rumor. And then, you never see that guy again. So you don't know if that's true.
he was a plant. He was actually like the gardener or something that Hanks just paid him. Here's $50 bucks, go in there and
say this as loud as you can and get out.
Right.
Okay,
they just run.
Well. Yeah, forever.
Mark, one of the things that popped into my head when you were talking about you're practicing your lines outside the coffee shop, how surreal would that have been for somebody to pay enough attention to you that when they actually saw the Band of Brothers later on, they're like, holy shit, I know that. Yeah. Where did I hear that from? And, it's just literally you on the side of the street yelling it a year and a half early.
Like somebody somewhere is saying that right now. And they're like, see, I told you. Yeah.
Exactly.
Did happen to some guy, queuing for the
How did you get on with the accent when you when they sort of put the script in your hand? Had you already worked on an accent before then?
It was mad. I only thought about this the other day because I knew I'd be chatting to you lads. I thought about that because we were sent, and I remember this today as well. We were sent to do like after around the third audition, I was anyway. Maybe I needed it, but I was sent to a voice coach that they organized before we went back in to meet the Americans. Like we've been reading with a lot of the London casting directors. So I think before some of the heavies were flying in, I was sent to a voice coach who happened to be Richard E. Grant's wife. So I went to Richard E. Grant's house for an hour. I sat with his wife, who was an amazing lady, and she just went through the script and was really cool about it. But I had just finished college. I went to university in Dublin, and for whatever reason, in the drama department there was basically 50% Americans. So I had done 4 years of theatery stuff with all these American actors. I'd done loads of American plays, very badly in an amateur fashion, but I had hung around with them and became a lot of good friends with them. So that was kind of like, not only was it a bit of training, but it was actually accent training for me. And then, yourself, I mean, it's so funny for when the accent, you kind of think of Americans doing Irish accents or Americans doing English accents. Growing up in Ireland, just watched American TV all my life. The way, I mean, that was, you just come home from school and watch the A-Team, or you'd watch Knight Rider, that's just, so I was practicing for years before I did the audition.
Now, did you guys get the Dukes of Hazzard too?
Absolutely, I did. Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, so much and that was just the coolest TV there was. So, as an Irish person, and even they say technically speaking, an Irish accent is closer to an American accent than an English accent is. I mean, even that voice coach that day, she said, for an Irish person to get to American is easier than it is for an English person. Whether that's, I believe it, but so like there was a couple of Irish boys on the job, yeah, and I think for Irish people it is a little bit easier.
We have some questions from the chat room and from Twitter. This is from the fans. Okay, we have a first question from Lindsay. It's about your uniform that you were given to wear. And I'm sure Nightmare's got a few questions about that. But what Lindsay wanted to know is about the helmet. She says that she's got a World War II helmet and it's very, very heavy. She can't imagine spending the day in it. So was your helmet heavy, the prop helmet?
Yeah, it was. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, some like the days where we wore full kit were the days that you just realized how hard these boys worked, in the way. And the helmet was. It's funny actually. I was only thinking about the helmet the other day because I remember I used to, the kind of going off point a tiny bit, but like the medic kit you'd have on your helmet. Hashey wore his around to the front. I used to get slagged for it so much, but because it looked like a bow or something, or looked like a little bow on my bonnet. But like the lads all put it on the side to be cool. But like you look at the photographs, and a lot of the boys did wear it at the front because if you go down, your natural instinct is to go for your face or go. So you grab, like it was closer to, it was, at the front of your helmet, you grab it there easier. But that's what a lot of the photographs the lads said. But a lot of the boys were too cool for that and put it on the side, I felt. But the helmet was, really, really heavy. And to the point that like they would genuinely fall off on a run, or, you're diving, or, people hitting the ground. It could easily go because they were so heavy. And I remember one of the boys might have broken his nose from his helmet fell into his face when we were doing the Dyke scenes. The Dyke scenes in 5 were really tricky.
Well, that's a new story. We haven't heard this. Go on.
Well, it's so vague, man. I think it was just a rehearsal, but one of the lads kind of fell over into his own helmet and just, left the set. It was during a rehearsal, but it was those Dyke scenes were we rehearsed them for a long time. And because you were just running up, looked like a wall basically with a bit of grass on top of it. And one of the boys did. I can't remember who it is. It's not a cool story if you don't know names. But yeah, someone did literally fall into their own helmet and leave the set that day just during rehearsals.
Did you take anything home with you from your uniform?
Yeah, we
anything.
We had a great story from Nolan Hemmings. He stole everything.
Did he steal? Because I heard one of the lads one day, an actor who wasn't on the show, was only on the show for a couple of days, and he, from where we got dressed to the front gate of the grounds, was about like a 3-minute drive. So the story goes that one of the guys just literally put his own clothes over his uniform and just drove out. Well, this guy got caught. He was at the gate. They sent him back, and he'd be like, I totally forgot to take my gear off. Yeah, but I suppose it was weird. Towards the end, people did. Like, I mean, I got a pair of boots, but my dog tags were taken. It was so embarrassing, actually. And really, really annoying. Like, and I don't know who or how it happened, or I misplaced them, or whatever happened, and why I even had them off me. But in the last, let's say, 3 days of shooting, my dog tags went missing, and maybe I don't know, 6 months later when we finished filming, Hashey called me. And he was like, "Are you all right?" I was like, "Yeah." Chats, and he's like, "Are you broke?" I was like, "What?" Like, what are you talking about? He goes, "Well, your dog tags are on eBay. My dog tags, your dog tags are on eBay. Someone's trying to sell them." So I was straight on there, like trying to find out who this person was, try to put a fake bid on, try to get them back, and it didn't work. I just couldn't get them. But yeah, so they were taken, and then someone sold them. So I was very pissed off about that.
You know what? In this day and age, with the internet, we could probably track those down. I wonder who ended up with Les Hashey's the dog tags from the show. The prop dog tags.
100% the dogs and from the show, and like the last week of filming, they went missing. And yeah, and he called me himself because I think one of his mates called him and said, "Your dog tags are on eBay." You know, really embarrassing.
Well, you know, a lot of the fans who follow this show all know each other. Mm-hmm. So let's put the word out there and let's find out if anybody has them.
It would be well. Look, if somebody who really wants them has them, that's okay. But if the idea that they were just taken was, and that it's just a bit sad. But anyway,
anybody from the UK will remember a show called Swap Shop that used to be on TV where you could swap things. So if you own those,
think of something very cool to swap. Yeah, I think it's something cool.
Find something.
Definitely.
One of the things that we've always heard from other people, especially anybody that was part of the Corps or spent a lot of time in the behind the scenes or on the set a lot, was all of the crazy shenanigans that happened after the filming or during the breaks or while you were hurrying up and waiting. Did you see any of the weird and wacky?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of famous ones. There's a couple of ones that there was like a crazy kind of food fight that happened on the trucks that time. I think, is it in episode 9? There's like a convoy of trucks driving through the woods, and it was just basically, everyone brings a bottle of water and some biscuits onto each, each deuce, and we're just driving down, and whatever they were filming from above and from the side, and it just was hours and hours and hours and hours, and we were singing as well the whole time, and just being such children that, your uniform, if you get a mixture of sparkling water and biscuit thrown at you, it's going to stain, and there are cameras around. But that didn't, there was, I don't know if you watch that episode closely and anybody has a bit of dry biscuit or wet biscuit on them, that may be what happened. But yeah, there was a few. I'm thinking back now because even the first day I was on set, we did rehearsals for I shot episode 5 before episode 4, and so the end of episode 3. So episode 5 was the first stuff I did, and we rehearsed the rescue of the British soldiers, where where the guys rowed across the water at night, and again I just didn't. It just took me a while to, like every newbie on the show, to get used to the rules, the system, showing rank, calling people by their character names, and keeping your accent going, all these things that did happen all the time, and not really believing it almost. So I remember being in a boat with, it was myself and Dexter and Ross, maybe about 4 of us, and they were teaching us how to just literally get the oar in and out of the water with as little sound as possible. And it was at nighttime. And Dexter asked me something, like, in character, he said, pass the message down the boat. He's like, "Will you tell Hashey to do blah, blah, blah?" And I'm not going to curse, but I said, "Will you tell Sergeant Martin to go?" And yeah, whatever. Just as in, like, could you not reach it? And then there was absolute silence in the boat. This is the second that I realized it wouldn't go on. And I remember Ross was like, "Sergeant Martin, did you hear what Private Hashey just said?" And he goes, "Yes, I did." It's like, "What are you going to do, Sergeant Martin?" He goes, "I'm going to think about it for a second." And then it was Ross, and Ross is like, "Should we throw him overboard, sir?" He's like, "No." For a second. This is at night, and we were rowing, and there was silence in the boat for another 5 minutes. It's like, I'm going to get chucked over, and I could have, and they would have been allowed to. So that was my first introduction to, show rank and don't curse in front of Dexter Fletcher, basically. Yeah.
Did you have any run-ins with the cadre or Captain Dye or anything like that you can tell us about?
Not really.
I would find it hard to believe because we all know that you're such a lovely guy, Mark. I can't.
Yeah, but at the same time, like, there was kind of an induction, like, I mean, you showed up, and these boys wanted to let you know that there was, like, there was no messing, and some of the actors did find it. There was some people who were like, "Wait a second, we're actors. What are you doing?" And you just had to toe the line, and I think, you can see why the discipline was so important, because if it was, this was going to shoot for a long, long time, and and if it slipped away or ebbed away, and by episode 7 or 8 you're like, no, I don't believe any of this anymore, it just wouldn't have worked. So I mean, the set was really, really strict, and these boys, they dealt with us, and they, like, the actors are young and giddy and messy and think they're cool now, and they're on this great show, and they're definitely there's a couple of actors who were a bit cheekier than others, and who had to be to tell the line a few times. One Scottish actor, actually, who was only on for one episode, who I won't name because it's name dropping, but yeah, he definitely was reprimanded a few times. And because I was around him a lot for my scenes, there was definitely the argument of, like, are we actors, are we soldiers? But that you never won if you try to bring it up. But but the lads were cool. I mean, like the vets were really like those the guys who were training us in were really inspirational, and like their knowledge was amazing. And you'd be a fool not to look to them for help, because they did know more than us, and they did. You were trying to depict real people in a real situation, and they knew more, and they studied more, and they experienced more. So you had to turn to them and let them be your guide. And they were a really cool bunch, and you became such good mates with them. And even the special extras, it was a funny mix, because we were the actors playing the characters, but the special extras, a lot of them were ex-army, so again, they had more experience of these types of situations than we did, as actors walking in. So a lot of the special extras were I became mates with a lot of those boys too, because they had it's so much to teach you, essentially, and to make you look the part and not to make mistakes.
Did any of the other actors take the regimental business of being in this production to the point where it was almost insanity, but you still understood what they were doing and it worked for them? Or
Buck Compton made me do press-ups one day in the middle of 5 or 6 of us standing around having a cup of coffee. I think it was on episode 4, just having a chat, blah, 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 blah. And he turned around and said, "Hashey, I want you to do 20 press-ups." And I just looked at him and was like, yeah. And he just said it. He was like, "I want you to do 20 press-ups." So got someone to hold my cup of coffee in the middle of it was an indoor shoot. It was the guys in the pub at the end. And I did 20 press-ups. And I don't know if he was joking, but I didn't hang around to see if he was, like, he was entitled to do it. He did it, and I did it. So I think a couple of the older actors took it on themselves to be not a threat, but just to kind of impose a system that would have existed, and that did exist and should have existed. So some of the, some of the older lads who were more experienced as actors and who were more experienced on the set and who outranked you, were happy to kind of just crack the whip a little bit sometimes, because, and I think you respected it, in a way, 100% you did. Yeah, because I know, but even, simple things, like stupid things, like people leaving their M1 line around, or, people just, if someone, again, all the cadre boys would be like, "Whose is this? Come over straight away, press ups," there were simple rules. You weren't allowed to say certain words, you weren't allowed to do certain things, and if you did those and you were caught, then you do press ups in front of everyone. And actually, I do have a crazy story from that episode. You want stories. This is the embarrassing one. This is the day where I thought, you just don't want to make a mistake on a set this size. And basically what happened was they were shooting episode 4 and episode 5 at the same time. And so I was in both. I mean, I was in 4, a lot more to do, but I was in 5, there were the guys on the dike. So somebody came to me and said, "Listen, you're in the 2 at the same time. So basically next week on, say, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you're going to film day shoots and night shoots back to back. Is that okay? We're going to bring you to a hotel. You'll have a little bit of sleep, have a shower, and then come back to set. Are you all right with that?" I was like, "Yeah, absolutely, 100%. So, and I remember the last day of this was, so I was exhausted. I slept about maybe 3 hours in 3 days. And the last day of filming was on episode 4. It was David Nutter was the director. And it was that scene which reads so beautifully on the page, was the idea that Hashey, when we were on the tanks driving through, there was a woman who'd slept with a German soldier, and she had her head shaved and she was holding her baby. And the idea was that Hashey's a nice guy, and he throws his lunch ration to this lady when no one else did. So, sounds brilliant. You get on your tanks, convoy of tanks, and the tank starts driving, the noise and the dust, and I can't see any lady and any baby standing beside the path. I can see my lunch kit, but that's about it. So they're like, "Okay, we're going to go. You're going to see her. You're going to throw. It's going to be beautiful. Go." And engine started. 3 days no sleep. I couldn't see or hear anything. So that was the worst day I had on set, because we did the sequence about 3 times until it worked, and everyone was losing their mind, and it was tricky. And I remember who was on the tank with me. I think like Craig and Dexter was on the tank, and everyone was like, "Look, yeah, you just can't see." So they had flags in the end and whistles, and someone would kick me in the knee, and eventually it worked. But it was an hour, and on that show there weren't any spare hours to do that stuff with 5 tanks. So that was a bit of a nightmare, but it worked.
Now, did they have to hire somebody special to do the knee kicking? Because I would be perfect for that gig.
No, well, actually, there was a queue of people who wanted to do that. Yeah, so I can't remember who it was in the end, but yeah, whoever the best, shiniest Cochrane's kicks the knee. That's how it works.
Oh man, that's this is the kind of stuff that I love, getting everybody's perspective on the same scenes and whatnot, just from a little different skew. Always brings out better stories, and I love the ones that you got going on here, man. This is good stuff.
There are all times when I made mistakes. There's nothing cool about any of them. It's like, oh, another time I made a mistake. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's other story. I mean, there was other stuff on the set as well, that like the stories about, I don't know if anyone mentioned this, about mobile phones, because of I think it was 2 years before they filmed Band of Brothers. There had been an incident with the the explosives, that a guy working on explosives on a similar type of film had actually died because a mobile phone, whatever the triggers were for the explosives, mobile phones can confuse the detonators. So I mean, like, horrendous, and the amount of stuff we were working with on the show. So yeah, it just became a huge issue for a while, because people were just actors and coming to set and bringing their phones and stuff. And that just came back to me. I just completely forgot about it, that there was just a lockdown. And at one point that, there were checks. Before you got to set, there were checks. People were asking you, or asked by 3 or 4 different people, do you have your phone? Because it was just too dangerous. And the guys in charge of the explosives, understandably, were like, we're not going to work if these boys keep bringing their phones, or if there are any phones around. So that's a random point, but that just came back to me there the other day.
Now, I'm just looking at the chat room, and we've got another question from the chat room. Lindsay is asking about getting hit in the Breaking Point episode, and how Ro was supposed to get hit too.
Yeah, I think I mentioned, that was, it's funny when, like a job that size with that number of actors and what happens. But, because even I was thinking, literally, before you guys called and thinking about the boot camp that we didn't do in the training, there was a scene in episode 3 that was cut just when I got to set, that was going to be watching the replacements, crawling through guts and getting bullets fired over their heads. But I think they felt it was just too close to episode 1, so they cut it. So we were training for that, and they stopped and said, don't worry about that, we're not going to do that scene. And that was cut really late, and it was rare for anything to be cut. And then the day I was going to set, the day that Hashey got hit, the script at the time read that it was Doc Rowe who came to help me. And then as Doc Rowe was tending to me, the Doc Rowe was hit as well, and the two was just lay side by side in the snow. And I thought that was such a cool scene. And literally that day, standing in the morning with myself, the two was standing at getting changed, and he slipped his disc in his back, like literally putting on his boots. So as we're just going to set, and they were like, and they didn't want to cancel it and stuff like that, so they changed the script on the moment. And I think it was Garcia comes into me after I got hit. But on the page, it was going to be Doc Rowe, which I thought which was sad, because it would have been great. But
you mentioned Garcia there, and that was one of the questions Jenny sent in, and you did touch on it earlier on slightly. She wants to know how helpful Tony Garcia was in giving you useful information, because for those that don't know, Garcia and Hashey were friends.
Yeah, they were best. I mean, they were foxhole buddies. During the whole conflict. So I mean, they stayed mates, and they were, that was great, because like I said, when it's one thing to talk to Lester and what he remembers and and it was funny because there was all that pressure as well. You think about all the men they interviewed, all the stories they heard, and even for Stephen Ambrose, what he was going to put into the book, and then going from the book to the show, what stories, what bits of information were going to go in, and what was chosen and what wasn't. So it was really tricky. And I'd speak to Lester a lot during the shoot, and things would come back to him all the time. He'd be like, I remembered when we were in Holland, this happened, and you should tell them, and you should tell the guys. And that was happening, and people were going to producers and saying, look, I just spoke to Lester. He said that on that day in the morning, this happened. And they'd be like, cool, but the scripts are written and the stories have been chosen. But at the same time, the producers did try their best, and the writers, and if they heard a cool story, they would try and throw information in, and anything that added to it. But it was tricky speaking to Lester, because, like I say, the more I spoke to him, and like you mentioned yourself about your grandfather, I mean, a lot of these guys, particularly even in the premiere in Paris, there were guys who hadn't spoken about the war until they went to Paris, until they watched they showed episode 3 in Paris. These guys hadn't spoken about it until they watched it being reportrayed, and that was really tricky for these guys. So even the phone calls and these actors pestering them for information and details, I think brought things up. And even the guys had been interviewed by HBO. Again, you're going to forget things, and things are going to come back to you later. So I used to feel guilty when Lester remembered things, and I'd go and ask the producers and tell details. And if they try to get it in or bring it back, or let's try and get that in somewhere else. And just, yourself, it's a big show, but there still wasn't room for every character's favorite bits and pieces. So there was always going to be things that just didn't make it. But then to speak to Tony was always great, because Tony, just a second voice and a second opinion and a memory that may have been clearer, or just to kind of bounce off somebody else in terms of, did this happen, and how did he feel that day, and do you remember, and do you speak to each other that day, and how was he that night? Those kind of details were kind of amazing, but again, then the frustration of finding out when the scripts were written were that any of the details you were just for your own head, really. They couldn't go anywhere else.
Had you not played Les Hashey,
yeah,
which character would you have liked to have played in the show?
That's a good question. I mean, there are parts that are like, I remember watching you're watching it episode by episode when it first came on, and I remember thinking, oh my God, Blythe, Mark Warren was so incredible at playing. The Blythe character was just so well done, and even that that later on in the series, Hashey was going to be a little bit of he's not great, and he's a little bit nervous, and he's a bit overawed, and I was like, oh, look how amazing this guy is at playing. I mean, the Blythe story was just so well done, so well told, and he was phenomenal in it, and I suppose as an actor, the guys who played slightly different rhythms, I suppose, are really interesting. Also, Dyke was such a great part. The lads who kind of didn't quite fit the mold are the ones that stick out for me, because there was such a kind of tragedy in those guys that they were there. They did what was asked, or I suppose Dyke is questionable, but that that their rhythm was just a little bit off, that they didn't quite fit. And as an actor, I think those are kind of those parts of me. But then I don't know. I mean, you look at Donnie's stuff. The journey of some of the characters across the 10 episodes can be amazing. I think Donnie's is one of the most interesting. Lipton, the journey he goes from episode 1 to the end is like an incredible one. I think almost becoming a fully grown man in front of your eyes. Not that he wasn't at the beginning, but just the journey he goes on personally is kind of amazing. Yeah. But I think in isolation, maybe Blythe's story was just. But again, I have no doubt that I couldn't even try and do what Mark did. But I think that character does stick out to me in terms when I first watched it the first time. I was like, wow, what an amazing story.
That's very interesting, because most of the actors that we did put that question to, I think they said Spears, didn't they? Nightmare. Most of the people said that they would have liked to play the character of Spears, which it was, again, the type of character that you just described. But there was so many characters in that show. That's, again, I think, why it appeals to so many people. There are so many different characters.
Yeah, I feel even when I was saying that, I was like, that's not right, though. I mean, there's no atypical soldier in it. There's nobody who's like, oh, yeah, he's the guy who does it all and the rest don't work. I suppose that's what made it, exactly, the richness of it was that they were immediately identifiable guys, people, lads, that you may or may not know in real life, and thrown into a situation that we all have a bit of an understanding of. And then that's what made it, so compelling. But yeah, I suppose the lads are just a little bit further away from the norm, I suppose, were the ones that were interesting. I suppose Spears was just was just very cool. I mean, again, that kind of borderline, should he even be a soldier? This guy's a bit of he's such a volatile man that, ordinarily in certain parts of society, he wouldn't be allowed to exist. And yet in this situation, like rewarding behavior that's normally scorned.
Yeah, exactly.
I believe Scott Grimes and who else was it? Was it the actor who played Spears who turned up at Ronald Spears' door one time?
Really?
Yeah, they turned up at his door because he didn't go to the reunions or anything like that. Ronald Spears, the veterans had the reunion every year, the Easy Company reunion, and now the children of the veterans are having continuing the reunions because there's not many of them left. So But yeah, they turned up to Ronald Spears' door, and I think, I'm sure they said they invited him in and they had a chat, but it was very private. It was a very private man.
But that's it again. Like a lot of these lads, a lot of the guys, you know, I know they were all interviewed for the series, but a lot of them hadn't spoken to their, like the amazing thing about the premiere in France was that, you know, the actors were invited, the veterans were invited, and then a lot of the veterans' families were invited, and that went down to different generations. And what was really, really, like that week was, I have to say, one of the highlights of the whole experience. Obviously, the show itself was an incredible thing, but that week was such a gift to give all of us to see and to witness. And I think, like I actually wrote Hashey a very drunken letter on the last night and put it under his door. And he referenced it a couple of times, and even his wife one time, Anna, who's not around and he sadly passed away a couple of years ago, she once wrote me an email saying, how come you never write emails like you did that letter that night? I was like, well, maybe do a bottle of whiskey or two. But anyway, but yeah, so, but to see people, to see men that age who'd lived that life, who'd been through it, and yet, like you said yourself, who chose never to speak about it, like a tactic or a coping mechanism or a way they just put it behind them, not denying that it happened, but not allowing anyone to dig deep or ask them to resurface things or to dwell on things. And a lot of the guys that week I felt were confronted with things that they hadn't dealt with or hadn't talked about in a long, long time. And that week was a really, really special, very moving week. And I don't know, you know, there's so many stories you remember, and I remember this happening that week. And I don't know if you heard this story, the Sergeant Martin. Was it Sergeant Martin? I don't know who it was. Maybe I'm totally wrong. I got the wrong name. One of the guys who had sworn he would never, ever, ever go back to the beaches ever again for the rest of his life. And we were in the hotel in Paris, and it was the next day was the day we were going to get up in the morning and drive to the beaches for the screening. And he had a heart attack that night in the hotel, like a minor heart attack, but he had a heart attack. The next day we woke up, was like, he's not here, he's in hospital. He's okay, but he did have a heart attack. We're going to go to the premiere. So we came back on the Thursday, and he was sitting in the bar having a drink. He said, "Told you I wouldn't go back." And he didn't fake it. Didn't fake it. Did get sick.
That's what you meant. I thought you meant he faked a heart attack.
He didn't. He was genuinely sick, but he came back out of hospital, back in the hotel, had a drink, and said, "I swear, I told you I wouldn't." So I mean, I don't know. I mean, that was kind of a cool way of passing it off, but he didn't go back.
I made a joke of it, yeah.
Mark, let me ask you this question: with the growing up on your uncle's stories about the RAF, and then getting this part in the Band of Brothers, did you get your perspective changed, or did you? Was there a huge difference between what you had heard and learned as a child to what you were actually doing on the same side yet in the other uniform?
Yeah, I suppose that's a tricky one. I mean, I suppose we were given so much information by the show. I mean, it was kind of incredible to educate, like what the materials they provided us with, and how much we were given and allowed to read and study before we went to set. That I even felt it was mad. I mean, I was sent so much stuff about Garcia. Like Dougie Spain is probably one of my best mates still. I see him a lot, and this idea that even in the auditions, even the build up to meet this guy who's going to play Garcia and you're playing Hashey, is like the risk, the potential you wouldn't like each other was so frightening. But that it worked out. But I suppose it's weird because again, my uncle's 90 now, and he fought in the RAF, and he's been so heavily involved in getting the memorial built in London a few years ago in Hyde Park for the RAF, and so. I sometimes I feel, the guys who survived, the guys who made it through, the guys who survived had to have something that's, I'm sure, a lot of casualties happen because war is full of casualties, but there's something about the guys that got through sometimes, and you can see it in them. There's a difference. And there's, my uncle, and to a degree, it feels like he's still, he's such a survivor, and that he's still, a little part of him is still in the war. There's a bit of him that hasn't let that go. And I can understand that, what gets you through a war, you can't just turn it off. That must be really tricky for these guys. But yeah, his stories are kind of amazing. Again, I mean, he was a rear gunner in the RAF, and he has the record for most flights. I mean, he was the guy at the back that the Germans just shot straight away, and out of every 3 planes that went up, 2 were shot down, and he went up 32 times.
Wow.
So his experience is kind of amazing, and he, just even seeing the development of war through the war and ideas the government were having or that were being passed down by the army into how we can do this, how we can win this. And yeah, I think the amazing thing about the show was that there was nothing left unturned. The research was just incredible. What they brought to the set, there was no question that wasn't able to be answered on set. You couldn't turn around and go, I wonder if people knew everything. So it was such an education, and yet, you're still actively reenacting something or telling this story through other people, through these guys' eyes. But, yeah, I mean, it's funny as well. I mean, I think I haven't talked to a lot of lads about it, but I literally used to have dreams of war, of conflict during the filming. And I had these dreams and nightmares for about 3 years afterwards. And I'm not saying I had some kind of a traumatic experience. I didn't, or that it stayed with me, but it did seep into your being. You were spending so much of your time trying to believe it and actively invest in it that it stayed. And it stayed with one of the lads did still talk about it as well, that just, you were almost institutionalized by the end of it. And it was, even a tricky period once you'd finished. It was like school, or, a group of lads hanging around with each other all the time, and just such a bond, and such a, you get to it was almost tricky to walk away from it in that sense, that how tangible and amazing it all was, and all laid out for you,
That brings up another question right there for me anyways. After it was all said and done, the premiere is over, everybody went home. What kind of emotions were you feeling then? Obviously, I'm guessing you needed a nap, but I mean that's got to be one of the most put through the ringer you've had to do in anything since or before that, right?
Yeah, I mean it was. I mean, it was kind of what was really clever about the show, and the way they worked it out and dealt with it. Bringing in young actors, people starting out, like a lot of the British guys. The English and Irish actors and Scottish and stuff had all just literally finished drama school. They'd all just, this was a lot of guys' first or second jobs. This was the beginning of their career per se in acting, and so, their first jump into that world. And so, there was a real parallel to that, and the guys who were playing that it was a brand new world. No, some of the American boys have been on some serious jobs, and some of them had an incredible experience. But a lot of the guys I felt in London, there's just no way that anything that could compare to the scale and the scope and the enormity of this show, that it was beyond anything anyone had ever experienced. There was nothing you could compare it to or understand it through. So it was so overwhelming when you arrived. It was so brand new and so hard to get a handle on that it was as close to being the guys when they experienced it, So that was kind of just, again, clever on the part of the guys involved in making the show, and how they sourced actors and the people that they kind of earmarked for parts, or how people ended up in the show. And even, like 7 or 8 auditions, and so many of the lads went through that process. It's almost like doing psych tests on people as well, in terms of finding out the personality of the actors and finding, like, this came up in Normandy, Ross, I don't know if you remember, like, just the kind of the respect that was required by the actors to play these real men and to do their lives justice. They're across the board. So many people invested so much and gave every ounce of effort and every ounce of what they had to make it as good and as real and believable in those parts that they played as possible. And that was just given. I remember, everyone tries their best, but there was something extra happened on this show. Absolutely. And I think nobody kind of went, you know what, nobody didn't care. Which is incredible to think that they found all these guys at the same time in the same job who did care,
Yeah, it's very clear to this day that the actors protect the legacy of the film profusely, because they took the parts very seriously. They respect the meant it. I mean, you mentioned Normandy. 14 years later, after the filming of the show, we went to Normandy in June for the end of the war celebrations and the Band of Brothers cast reunion. What was it like for you? Did it, from like your opinion? I mean, from how can I phrase this? The fans' response 14 years later, were you surprised by that? By the response you guys got? I mean, the queues were out of the door. People were queuing for hours and hours and hours just to get a glimpse of you guys.
How
did that feel?
It's I don't know. It's just testimony to the piece that the show is. It's just, you know, I mean, you know, I've got friends, a couple of Irish friends of mine, my dad, people in my family that are just, you know, there are people who are hugely interested in World War II, irrespective. That's just a piece of history that they are fascinated and intrigued by. And for that era to be depicted so well, and you know, even my dad was saying recently, like when I came back from France, he watched the show again. I think it was shown on maybe Sky or something showed it recently. So a lot of my friends watched it. Some of my friends watched it for the first time. I think Sky, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but yeah, Sky showed it in the UK. And there's a couple of friends of mine who've never ever watched it before. And even they're almost angry. And they're like, why didn't you, how come I never watched this? Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you say to me? It's like, what do you mean? What? I told you millions of times, you know, that kind of thing of, how did I not see it yet? What is wrong with you? Why didn't you say? And even people like, I gave you the box set. Yeah, I don't know. I just never really watched. And then this kind of rage that it took them so long to get it, or that they wasted so many years not knowing it. But I think, I don't know. And it just stands up, you know, it's so rare as well for any film, any TV show to be as valid and as valuable and as good 15 years later than it was the day it was made. And it just, you know, the effort that was put in to make it look great has stood up, and it's just a beautiful piece of cinema, and it still looks great. And it's the detail made to make it look like the time means it will always look like the time, you know, and it's beyond question. And so it's just and it can never almost be repeated, you know. I remember even again my dad, when I was in London filming it, Dad came to set one time, and I think I must be the record holder for bringing people to set. That was one thing I definitely didn't cop on to. I was just like, "You and I bring people, aren't you?" He was like, "No one's going to tell you no, but I don't know if you." Yeah, cool. I brought, like, my sister came out and my dad came out, and I mean, people definitely brought people, but I think I probably have the record. But yeah, I do.
That's awesome.
Well, I don't know if it's awesome.
I think it's awesome because I would have done the same thing. I would have just been excited.
Cheeky. I just was like, cool, yeah, jump in. There's a car. The car brings us to work. Woohoo! And then, yeah. I definitely did it a lot. I mean, but then I'm sure there are actors who don't want people to come to set because they want, like, listen, I need to go to work now, so I'll tell you later. But I don't know. I just think I just needed someone else to witness it and go, check this out. Look at this set. So, yeah, that was definitely a part of it for me. But,
so what was it like for you when you went to Brecourt Manor and saw the site of the guns and then the American cemetery in Normandy? What was it? What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, the American cemetery was really kind of mind blowing. I'd never been there before. I've been to, we didn't go there when we went to the premiere, so I'd seen different parts of Normandy and I'd seen the beaches, but the cemetery is that's something that's really going to stay with me. And it's funny as well because two of the Irish actors who were on the show, the guys they played are in that cemetery, and neither of them knew that, which I thought was insane.
I remember you texted one of them.
Yeah, both of the lads. I took pictures of their headstones and sent them to them, and they're, both really just, I don't know if it never dawned on them, but never realized, never asked the question, but yeah, they were both very shook up by the fact, and both again had this, I have to go there, let's go.
Was that Cowboy Hall?
That was Hall and Salty Harris, yeah.
Yes, of course it was, yes. I've got footage. I've got footage of that moment actually when we were at the graveside, and when you said, "Oh, I'm going to tell the guy who played that part," and I'm sure he would. That's one of the great things. I'm sure he would probably love to go there and see that. Just one of these things. No matter how small a part he played in Band of Brothers, it just seemed to have a big effect on everybody who was in it and involved with it.
It did. I mean, even it's funny when, as an actor, you're an actor and you do jobs and every actor wants to work, but this one, it's just a really, I sound like a bit, I don't want to sound like, Hook, guess who I am, but sometimes as an actor you get recognized for different jobs you've done and people come up and go, oh, you're the guy from, but, and not to sound cheesy, but if somebody mentions this show, it's a very different thing. It doesn't feel the same, and that's the thing. It doesn't feel the same. It doesn't feel the same as any other TV show or film. Because it just isn't, and the experience is different. And I even remember it not even as an acting experience. Sometimes it was just that that year of my life when I spent the time with those guys. That sounds ridiculous, but it's totally true. And I get nervous about like a school reunion. Like you're nervous about meeting the lads again because it literally brings back memories, and it brings back the time when you were all hanging out together and working on the show. And I mean, it was just a very special thing. And I think what was created was very special, and that doesn't come from nowhere. So yeah, the whole thing is difficult. But yeah, like I say, the cemetery was really, really deeply affecting, and I wasn't even ready for it. We just got up, jumped in a van, and went, and I had no idea how it's an amazing thing. If anyone, I'm sure everyone wants to try and get to do the beaches, and particularly if you can do it in June once in your life. But the cemetery is not to be missed. It's just the immaculate, pristine nature of a memory preserved, and it's so, I don't know what it is. It's like it's the clinical cleanliness of its sadness or something. I mean, that sounds ridiculous, but it's just something really deeply affecting by it.
Do you still get recognised in the street? I mean, because you haven't changed really at all since the show. Do you get recognised a lot from Band of Brothers?
It's mad, yeah. I mean, I don't know how. I mean, I always question them and ask them, did the DVD player break on episode 4 or whatever happened? But yeah, sometimes, yeah, I do, and it's mad, and it's I don't know. I mean, I think there are, like yourself, there are people who like the show, and there are people who love the show, and I think, I mean, people are. It's mad, particularly because even I live in Dublin, so somebody comes up to me, people in Dublin, to think, is that guy that it's a bit of more of a leap than just if you meet somebody in LA or New York, I suppose. But yeah, it does happen, and like I say, there's something. It's a different kind of thing if that does happen, because I don't know. It's like a tip of the hat to Lester. It's not just me, and I think that's kind of what it is, and even. Because I mean, I'm funny, and I know Ross, you know this. Like, I'm not good at doing interviews, and I do find it hard to talk about some of these things. And even like when we went to Paris for the premiere, we were all asked to do a few interviews and stuff. And I just said, listen, Lester Hashey is here. Doesn't he's the man you want to talk to, not me. So I don't know. I mean, particularly when Lester was alive, I just really felt that. I'm only going to try and pretend to know what he knows, so he was the man to ask.
One of the things that I found out after doing all these interviews and talking with the guys who portrayed the real heroes, the gentlemen themselves, the veterans, when they came back, I think one of the most inspirational things is just looking at the lives they led after the war, and all of the amazing things that happened to the guys that made it out alive from the Eagle's Nest and beyond. I mean, if you go to the Band of Brothers wiki and just look at Lester Hashey's life, it is absolutely mind-boggling and amazing. All of the accolades and all of the stuff after the war that he did with the Red Cross and swimming and first aid, and his one of his quotes on the page that I read was that the first part of his life he learned how to take a life, and the second part he learned how to save a life.
Yeah, that's cool.
And it just blows me away to think that these same guys, before 1945, were scared, youthful men doing a job nobody wanted to do. Mm-hmm. They felt that they needed to, they had to, and they did it. And then they came home and just went about their day.
Yeah, it's a funny, because I don't know the numbers or the figures or the statistics of how many guys didn't readjust fully, because these guys just. I don't know what it was. Like, is a generational thing or a time where they just went, because, like Lester stayed in Europe for so long. He didn't really go back to America for a while, but, I don't know what it was, that they just left full of life and not scared of life or damaged by life or life weary, that they all went out and attacked life afterwards and achieved so much. And like you say, moved on as adults so successfully. I suppose, I don't know, maybe we're all, incorrectly informed that so many guys post-war don't readjust. But like you say, the guys depicted in this show did spectacularly. It's kind of amazing.
Now, on that note, how would you describe the veterans after portraying one? How would you describe them, the real heroes of Easy Company?
How'd I sum them up? I mean, I don't know. It's so hard not to be, I think what happens to everybody when they watch a war movie or a war TV show, even just the guy or the girl sitting at home on the couch, what makes any war movie compelling is that, it begs you the question, what would you do if you were that guy? What would you do if someone came and asked this of you? And we all kind of hope, oh yeah, I'd jump in there. I'd be the first one on the line. And then when you explore it and you meet these guys and you understand the exact nature of what they did, what was expected of them, what they had to do before they even went into the conflict, and what the conflict demanded of them, it's that scary thing that it makes you really ask yourself and maybe understand that that I'm not so sure I could do this, or I'm not so sure I would be as good as these guys, because it's easy to say it on the couch, but when you see what actually happened, it's incredibly humbling, and you only hope that you would be, that you would behave the same way and you would act the same way and undertake the same things. But I suppose you never know, and hopefully never have to know. But it's just quite extraordinary. I mean, I remember embarrassingly, even one of the first conversations I ever had with Lester, I kind of said, you grew up where you grew up and you were born where you were born, and the idea of going over to fight, a war in a different continent, with people you didn't know, and again, what was that difficult? Was there ever a moment where you went, what the hell am I doing? Why am I flying? He was, he was nearly all right with me. He's like, what the hell are you talking about? How could I not go? Why? He just didn't even understand what the question was. Just the idea that for 1 second he would second guess, or maybe go, you know what? I don't know. He was like, there was no doubt in my mind ever for 1 second that I would not go, should not go, and had no right to be there. And, that again, that even that question came into my mind showed me the difference between me and him, so that was kind of, but yeah.
What's in store for Mark Huberman at the moment? What are you doing? You're about to do a play at the moment?
Yeah, I'm in over my head, maybe, but I'm in rehearsals for, Oedipus in the Abbey Theatre in Dublin, for the Dublin Theatre Festival. So that's going to be starting in about 10 days. Woohoo!
Now, does the Americans just butcher that name? Because I've never heard it with a hard E. It's always been
Oedipus.
Yeah.
Oedipus. Yeah, I don't know. I think English and Irish would say Oedipus. Americans say Oedipus. But look, I won't fall out over it. Somebody's right, somebody's wrong.
Yeah, and I'm not going to be one to, I hate the people who, well, you're saying that wrong. Well, you know what? Yeah. You're saying that wrong, because it's going to cost you your front teeth. How about that?
You whistle forever.
You can just whistle everything now.
Mm-hmm.
We got a kid in the chat room, Bobby, who is in Ireland. He lives there, not visiting or nothing, but he wants to catch the train to Dublin and catch the Oedipus show. When's the date on that run?
Oedipus is going to be, it previews from the 24th September and it runs until October 31st. So yeah, nice window of time to catch it if they want to come up.
Oh, absolutely.
Mark, thanks for joining us, mate. It's been a pleasure.
That's all, lads. I loved it. Thanks so much for doing it.
Absolutely, Mark. Thank you so much for your time, and we will see you in the funny pages. Let me know next time you're in Chicago visiting Dougie. You're about you're about 6 hours away from KC. We'll have pizza.
Same goes. If you're ever in Scotland, look me up, give me a shout, let me know, and I'll take you around.
Man. Yeah, absolutely.
We'll have a whiskey. Okay, pal. Good to speak to you.
Thanks so much.
All right, to the family. Cheers, Mark. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Mark Huberman, a.k.a. Lester Hashey from Band of Brothers.